The story kicks off with a loud crash. A plate smashes on the floor, and all eyes are on Agnes, a servant in this super fancy manor. The other servants? Yeah, they're totally enjoying the moment since Agnes is basically their favorite punching bag. Before she can even process what happened, the head servant storms in, doesn't ask a single question, and immediately blames her. She gives her the usual speech, how she's useless, how she should be grateful the master of the house, Count Wilfrid, picked her up, blah, blah, blah. Classic bullying moment. Agnes doesn't argue. She just takes it, like she always does, and rushes off to do her next task. But while she's working, her mind starts wandering. Here's the thing. She has no memories of her childhood. Nothing. Zip. The only thing she knows is that she used to wander around aimlessly, completely lost until she was on the verge of collapsing. And then, out of nowhere, Count Wilfrid showed up and took her in. Sounds noble, right? But something about it feels off. Like there's a missing piece in the puzzle. And Agnes can't shake the feeling that the answers are just out of reach. As if things weren't bad enough, the other servants keep dumping the hardest tasks on Agnes. But, like always, she takes it without a word. Her face as blank as ever. To them, she's nothing more than a puppet, and they don't hold back on reminding her of it. Just as she's about to get to work, she accidentally bumps into the last person she wants to cross. Count Wilfrid's daughter, Kara. And of course, Kara is not the forgiving type. Before Agnes can even process what happened, she's already kneeling, apologizing like her life depends on it. But mercy? Yeah, that's not in Kara's vocabulary. Instead, she goes full-on cruel mode, kicking Agnes, leaving scratch on her face and spitting out insults like Agnes is the lowest of the low. And just when you think she's done, she casually dumps a whole bucket of water on her. Satisfied with her masterpiece, Kara smirks and walks off, leaving Agnes drenched in freezing water. But does Agnes break down? Nope. She just gets up and keeps working, now sweeping the garden floors outside in the cold wind. Her body is trembling. The pain is there, but she doesn't let it show. No matter how bad it gets, she still clings to one thought. She owes everything to Count Wilfrid. He gave her a place in this manor, even if that place feels like hell. By the time night falls, Agnes is burning up with a fever. Not surprising, considering she spent hours outside, soaked and freezing. But does anyone care? Nope. The head servant and the others don't even pretend to be concerned. Instead, they just blame her for getting sick, acting like it's her fault for existing in the first place. No medicine, no warm bed, no kindness. Just Agnes, left alone, fighting against the fever as her body grows weaker. Then, something strange happens. A soft, warm light begins to glow around her, wrapping her in a strange, almost comforting energy. Slowly, her hair and eye color start to shift, changing into something different, something unfamiliar. Before she can make sense of it, exhaustion takes over, and she slips into unconsciousness. And that's when the nightmare begins. In her dream, fire rages all around her, swallowing a once grand manor in thick, suffocating smoke. In the middle of the chaos, two figures lie motionless on the ground, a man and a woman, both covered in wounds. A young girl with silver hair and red eyes stands there, tears streaming down her face, desperately calling out to them. "Father! Mother!" The young girl dashes to her wounded mother, desperately trying to wake her up. As she shakes her, her mother's eyes slowly open, weakly reaching out to her. The girl cries even harder, clutching onto her as if that could stop everything from falling apart. With the last of her strength, her mother struggles to sit up, gathers the little power she has left, and casts a spell. As the magic surrounds the girl, her mother finally speaks, calling her name. Agnes. Then, with a faint smile, she promises that Agnes will grow up and live a happy life. The next morning, Agnes wakes up, still thinking about the strange dream from last night. She gets up and gets ready for work, but something feels off. Strangely enough, she feels way better than she should. Then she catches her reflection in the mirror, and stops. Her eyes, they're red. Shock rushes through her as she recalls the dream. What's going on? Meanwhile, the whole manor is in a frenzy. The Duke's carriage has just arrived, and the servants are buzzing with excitement. This could only mean one thing. The Duke might be here to propose to the Count's daughter. As Agnes walks through the halls, she feels relieved to see her eye color is back to normal. But then another realization hits her. The scratch on her face? Completely gone. Her thoughts drift back to the dream. Was it really just a dream? Or something else? On the other side of the manor, Kara finally gets the confirmation she's been waiting for. The Duke has sent a messenger to ask for her hand in marriage. The news sends a thrill through her. What kind of man awaits her? Is he handsome? Powerful? She's so curious she can't think about anything else. As she paces through the halls, she spots Agnes cleaning in the hallway. And just like that, a wicked idea pops into her head. She calls Agnes over. Agnes stiffens. Her heart races. After everything that happened, she expects to get hit again. But instead, Kara simply tells her she needs her for something. Meanwhile, in another part of the manor, the messenger is deep in discussion with the Count and Countess. Back with Kara, she drags Agnes into a room, slams the door shut, and locks it. With a smirk, she tells Agnes she doesn't want their important guest seeing someone like her. Then, without a second thought, she walks away. Agnes panics. She bangs on the door, her voice shaking as she begs for someone, anyone, to open it. But no one comes. After the meeting ends, Kara bursts into the room, eager to hear the news. But the moment she sees her parents' gloomy faces, her excitement falters. The Count, looking troubled, finally speaks. The messenger came with a marriage proposal for Count Wilfrid's daughter. Kara's heart skips a beat. Her face flushes with excitement. This is exactly what she expected. Smiling, she declares that she's going to be a duchess. But then, her mother's expression darkens. Something's wrong. That's when Count Wilfrid reveals the name of the man who sent the proposal. Duke Gilbeyd Deddricks, a powerful noble from an eastern country. The color drains from Kara's face. Her body stiffens. That name, it's infamous. Rumors say the Duke is a mysterious figure, rarely seen at social gatherings. But the real horror? Countless brides have married him, only to die under unnatural circumstances within months. Because of this, people call him the Grim Reaper Duke. Panic takes over. Kara screams, refusing to be sent to her death. Her mother immediately sides with her, horrified at the idea of giving her daughter away. The Count sighs, admitting that he doesn't want this either. But rejecting the proposal could destroy their house's reputation. As Kara sobs, the Count suddenly smirks. A new idea has formed in his mind. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the manor, the lock on a door clicks open. Someone calls out to Agnes, telling her that the Count is waiting for her. Agnes is escorted to the Count's office, confused and unsure of what's happening. As soon as she arrives, Count Wilfrid wastes no time and drops a bombshell. Agnes is the perfect bride for Duke Deddricks. Silence fills the room. Kara's jaw drops. The Countess looks just as stunned, immediately asking if Agnes is supposed to impersonate Kara and take her place. But the Count steps closer to Agnes, shaking his head. That's not the case at all. Then, with a calm but firm voice, he reveals the truth. Agnes's full name is Agnes Wilfrid. She isn't just a servant, she's the only daughter of his beloved late younger brother. Agnes stands frozen. Her mind spins, struggling to process what she just heard. She has Wilfrid blood. And that is exactly what the Deddricks want. Agnes stands there, her mind racing. Agnes Wilfrid? Did she really hear that right? She isn't the only one shocked. Kara stares at her, completely thrown off. The idea that Agnes shares the same Wilfrid blood as her is almost impossible to believe. The Countess looks just as shaken. How could this girl, the servant she's ignored all this time, be her own niece? Then, Count Wilfrid places his hands on Agnes and calmly states the truth. From now on, she is their daughter. He goes on to explain that after his brother died, he took Agnes in as his adopted daughter. But for certain reasons, he had no choice but to raise her as a maid. The Countess demands a proper explanation, but the Count simply reassures her. He'll explain everything later. Right now, he wants to speak to Agnes alone. He instructs them to leave. Kara instantly protests, shouting in frustration. But the moment her father's sharp gaze lands on her, she swallows her words. She has no choice but to obey. As she walks past Agnes, Kara throws her a hateful glare, making it clear. She will never acknowledge Agnes as her sister. Agnes, still reeling, struggles to process it all. For 7 years, she has lived as a servant, never knowing she was anything else. But the Count insists. It was all to protect her. Then comes the real blow. Her parents were murdered. The words hit her like a wave. Images from last night's dream flash in her mind. The burning manor, the wounded man and woman. Could that have been a memory? Before she can dwell on it, the Count leans in, his voice low. Now is the time for her to embrace her true identity and marry the Grim Reaper Duke in Kara's place. Agnes stiffens. The rumors flood her mind. Every noblewoman who marries the Duke dies, one by one. Is she being sent to die in Kara's place? She barely has time to react before the Count pats her head, then leans even closer. His next words are sharp, cutting. Keeping her alive was worth it, despite how useless she's been. His expression shifts. With a cold smile, he tells her to be proud. After all, she's finally going to meet her parents. Before she can even process his words, the doors swing open. Servants rush in, ready to prepare her for the wedding. The Count instructs them to make her look worthy of a duke's home. The preparations begin. The servants bathe Agnes, brush her hair until it shines, apply flawless makeup, and dress her in the finest clothes. Bit by bit, the transformation takes place. By the time they're finished, she's unrecognizable. No one would ever guess she was once a mere maid. Then the carriage arrives, the one that will take her to Duke Deddrick. Dressed in elegance, Agnes steps forward, ready to go. The servants bow as she passes, their expressions unreadable. But not Kara. She stands tall, eyes filled with disdain. To her, this is nothing more than a delayed death sentence. She scoffs, convinced that Agnes won't last a day in the Duke's hands. Coldly, she remarks that it's an honor for a lifeless puppet like Agnes to finally have a use. By dying. Agnes doesn't react. She simply bows in return and keeps walking, stepping toward the carriage waiting at the gate. Her fate is sealed. The Count stands beside Agnes, his expression composed as he addresses the Duke's representative. He formally presents a daughter of the Wilfrid family as an offering to the Duke. With that, the time has come. Agnes steps toward the carriage, her mind oddly calm. No matter what happens, she tells herself, she will never return to this manor. This is the end of her life here. Until then, she will play her role. Be the puppet to the end. But just before she climbs inside, she turns back. Facing the Count, she lowers her head in a respectful bow and quietly bids her farewell. Then, without hesitation, she steps into the carriage. The wheels begin to move. Leaving behind the Wilfrid Manor, Agnes is now on her way to the Duke's house. Inside the carriage, Agnes sits stiffly, her hands trembling slightly as unease settles deep in her chest. The further the carriage moves away from the Wilfrid Manor, the paler her face becomes. This is real. There's no turning back. Meanwhile, at the Duke's residence, the news has already reached him. His newest potential bride will arrive tomorrow. This time, a young lady from the Wilfrid family. Duke Deddrick barely reacts. Sitting in his grand study, he listens in silence. Another one. With a cold, unreadable expression, he leans back and mutters the same thing he always does. It doesn't matter who's coming. All brides are as good as dead. A warm breeze swept through the manor's garden as young Agnes played outside with her friend. Laughter filled the air as they ran around, their small feet kicking up the soft grass. As they paused to catch their breath, Agnes sighed, glancing toward the tall gates in the distance. She told her friend that she wasn't allowed to go outside. Her mother had warned her. She had the same power as her, and until she could control it, she had to stay within the manor. It wasn't bad. Everyone here was kind to her. But still, she couldn't help but feel bored. Her friend, with an innocent smile, suddenly had an idea. "Then let's go out together." Agnes's face lit up with excitement. The idea of stepping beyond the manor, of seeing the world outside, had always felt like an impossible dream. But then, hesitation crept in. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. "The outside world is scary." Sensing her worry, her friend stepped closer, full of confidence. He promised that no matter what happened, he would protect her. To seal the deal, he hooked his pinky around hers, declaring their promise. She should always smile by his side. And, without a hint of doubt, he told her they would be together forever. It almost felt like a proposal. Agnes beamed, heart pounding with excitement, and without a second thought, she agreed. Back in the carriage, Agnes stirs awake, her eyes fluttering open as the dream fades into reality. Was that really just a dream? Or a memory? Before she can think too much about it, she realizes something. The journey is almost over. Peering out the window, she gasps softly. The scenery outside is breathtaking. Rolling hills, grand architecture, everything feels like a fairy tale. But then, reality sinks in. The rumors about the Duke creep back into her mind, sending a shiver down her spine. Her awe is quickly replaced with fear. Noticing the change in her expression, the Duke's messenger speaks up, asking if something is troubling her. After a brief hesitation, Agnes quietly asks, "What kind of man is Duke Deddrick?" The messenger responds without hesitation. The Duke is a wonderful and formidable master, strong, respected, but he doesn't show much emotion. Then his voice lowers slightly. He will do anything to protect his dukedom. Ruthless to those who cross him, merciless against threats, cold-hearted. Each word tightens the knot in Agnes's stomach. She stares ahead, fear gripping her chest. There's no doubt in her mind now. She is walking straight toward her death. Upon arriving at the manor, Agnes steps out of the carriage, her fear still evident in her expression. Awaiting her are the butler and several servants, who formally greet her before escorting her inside. She is led to the parlor, where Duke Deddrick awaits. As she enters, she notices him standing by the window, his back turned. The weight of the situation presses down on her. She is about to meet the infamous Grim Reaper Duke. Summoning her composure, she bows respectfully and introduces herself. Deddrick turns, stepping toward her. Without hesitation, he instructs her to lift her head and acknowledges that she has come all this way to be his bride. However, he immediately follows with an unexpected statement. He has no intention of marrying her. For her own sake, he advises her to return home at once. Agnes is stunned. Her mind instantly replays the reality she left behind. The Wilfried Manor, where she was nothing more than a servant, where returning would mean facing further mistreatment and misery. Gathering her resolve, she firmly states that she will not return. Since leaving the Wilfried house, she has no home to go back to. Then, in a desperate move, she kneels before him, hands trembling, and pleads. If he has no use for her, she would rather he end her life. Deddrick remains silent, but he does not miss the way her hands shake. Deddrick simply states that he doesn't enjoy killing, and that he'll decide what to do with her later. Until then, she can stay in the manor. Agnes is stunned. For a moment, she can't even find the words to respond. Noticing her silence, Deddrick raises an eyebrow and asks if there's a problem. Snapping out of it, Agnes quickly shakes her head. With that settled, he turns to Klaus, his butler, and instructs him to take care of Agnes as a guest. Then, without another word, he leaves. Agnes remains frozen in place. She's still alive. She had prepared for death, yet somehow she's still breathing. A wave of relief washes over her, even if she doesn't fully understand why. Back in his study, Deddrick speaks plainly. He has no intention of getting married. Klaus, ever the loyal butler, tries to reason with him. He needs to settle down eventually. But Deddrick doesn't budge. His decision is final. Or at least, that's what he thinks. Until a memory flashes in his mind. Agnes's trembling hands. Frowning, he turns to Klaus and asks, "Is she really from the Wilfried family?" Something feels off about her. His instincts tell him Count Wilfried is up to something. And so, without hesitation, Deddrick orders Klaus to investigate Agnes thoroughly. If this is some kind of test, he intends to find out exactly what Count Wilfried is planning. Agnes stands by the window, lost in thought. Everything that led her here replays in her mind, and she knows exactly what she must do. Elsewhere, Klaus rushes into Deddrick's study, panicked. Agnes is missing. Deddrick's expression hardens. He recalls their first meeting, her eyes filled with the resolve of someone ready to die. Without hesitation, he leaves the room. In the manor's garden, dry leaves scatter as the wind blows. Still dressed in her gown, Agnes quietly sweeps them away. A voice interrupts her. "Deddrick." She turns, startled. When he asks what she's doing, she simply explains. She saw the leaves and decided to clean, thinking she could be a little useful until he decided her fate. Deddrick reminds her that she didn't come here as a servant. Agnes freezes, quickly apologizing. He glances around, then, to her surprise, thanks her for tidying the garden. Before she can react, a sharp wind cuts through the air. Agnes shivers but tries to hide it. She's used to the cold. Deddrick notices. Without a word, he drapes his coat over her shoulders, casually telling her to head inside. Dinner is almost ready. For the first time in a long while, Agnes feels warm. Later in the dining room, Deddrick and Agnes sit across from each other, sharing a quiet dinner. Agnes hesitates. The elegant table setting feels unfamiliar. It's been so long since she had to use proper utensils. Noticing her uncertainty, Deddrick casually explains how to use them. His tone neutral, free of judgment. Still, he adds that she's free to eat however she likes. After all, it's just the two of them. Agnes pauses, then carefully picks up the fork and takes a bite. As he watches her, Deddrick asks if she likes the food. Agnes, slightly blushing, admits she's never eaten anything this delicious before. A warm, almost imperceptible smile crosses Deddrick's face. He's glad. After finishing their meal, Agnes remains seated, her voice steady but uncertain as she finally asks, "Will she be killed after all?" Deddrick doesn't flinch. Instead, he calmly acknowledges his reputation as the Grim Reaper Duke and admits that, to the world, it will seem as if she has died. Agnes stiffens, confused. Seeing her reaction, Deddrick explains. He never wanted to marry, but brides kept arriving at his doorstep. Since he couldn't take them as wives, he had to find another solution. At first, he simply sent them back home. But over time, he learned the truth. Many of them suffered miserable fates. So he changed his approach. Instead of sending them back, he made it appear as though they died in his manor, and secretly gave them new lives. Some remarried men he trusted, others chose merchants or adventurers, and some left, excited to live freely without marrying at all. In the end, they were happier than if they had returned to the homes that never truly welcomed them. Hearing Deddrick's explanation, Agnes takes a moment before speaking. Meeting him in person has made her realize something. The rumors weren't true at all. Smiling softly, she admits that he's the first person who ever thanked her and showed her kindness. Then, without hesitation, she tells him, "He's a very kind man." Deddrick freezes. For a moment, he looks genuinely taken aback. Then, suddenly, he stands up. Agnes flinches, instinctively lowering her head. Had she said too much? She quickly apologizes, but Deddrick only sighs. Calmly, he reminds her, she is an important guest. No one here will harm her, not even him. With a reassuring tone, he tells her that she is safe. Then, without another word, he turns and leaves. Agnes exhales. For the first time since arriving, she feels relief. In his room, Deddrick sits with a book in hand, but his mind refuses to focus. No matter how much he tries to brush it off, he keeps thinking about Agnes. From the way she acts, it's clear. She was raised without kindness. Sighing, he decides to take a walk through the manor, hoping to clear his thoughts. But as he reaches the hallway near Agnes's room, he hears something. Soft groans. He stops. The sound is faint but unmistakable. Agnes. Frowning, he knocks on her door. No response. His instincts flare. Something isn't right. Without hesitation, he opens the door. Inside, Agnes is curled up in bed, her face damp with tears. Her voice trembles as she mumbles, calling for her mother to save her. Deddricks' expression shifts. For the first time, true concern crosses his face. Agnes is trapped in a nightmare. She relives the moment she was taken in by the Count, the man she only knew as her master. From that day on, she was nothing more than a servant, enduring mistreatment from everyone around her. While sleeping, she cries for help, her distress evident. Deddricks, standing beside her bed, watches with concern. Worried by her reaction, he asks if she's okay. Agnes slowly wakes up, her breathing uneven. Before she can say anything, Deddrick apologizes for entering unannounced, explaining that he heard her voice and was concerned. He then asks if she had a nightmare. Still teary-eyed, Agnes takes a moment before revealing that she believes she dreamed about her childhood. However, she admits that she has no real memories of it. Deddrick hands Agnes a glass of water, his gaze steady as he questions what she meant about having no memories. Agnes takes a slow sip before revealing everything she knows. 8 years ago, Count Wilfrid picked her up. But before that, she remembers nothing. She only learned yesterday that she was even part of the Wilfrid family. Deddrick listens in silence, his expression unreadable. Then another truth slips from Agnes's lips. For the past 8 years, she was nothing more than a servant in the Wilfrid manor. For a moment, she braces herself, expecting anger. After all, a mere servant had been sent to him as a bride, but Deddrick doesn't react the way she thought he would. Instead of outrage, his response is calm. He acknowledges what she went through, expressing empathy rather than judgment. Agnes must have endured difficult times, and he seems to understand that. Agnes is surprised by Deddrick's reaction. She had expected indifference, maybe even rejection, but not understanding. Still, she continues. Ever since she lost her memories, emotions have felt distant. People always called her a creepy, emotionless puppet, and eventually, she believed it. At least now, by being sent here, she was finally useful to the Wilfrid family. The pieces click into place for Deddrick. Now he understands. This is why she was so calm about dying. With a steady tone, he reminds her, she is not a puppet. The fact that she feels fear, has nightmares, and suffers means she is human. She can feel pain. His voice remains firm as he makes one thing clear. He will never give her a reason to want to die. From this moment on, she is going to live. Then, he asks, is there something she wants? Agnes takes a moment to think. Then, finally, she answers. She wants to know who she really is. Deddrick exhales, relieved. He promises to help her. For the first time in as long as she can remember, Agnes smiles from the bottom of her heart. The next morning, Agnes's maid helps her get ready for breakfast with Deddrick. As she enters the dining room, she greets him and, a bit nervously, says she's glad they were able to talk last night. Without hesitation, Deddrick states that she will stay. While she's here, she will learn proper noble etiquette, and in the meantime, he will find her a suitable groom. He also assures her that he will help her regain her lost memories. Agnes feels warmth rise to her cheeks. She never expected such an offer. Smiling, she agrees, relieved that she can stay. Later, in his study, Deddrick reviews the report from Klaus. Agnes's parents had died 8 years ago, and her father was indeed Count Wilfrid's younger brother. However, there are no official records or details about their deaths. Noticing Deddrick's interest, Klaus casually asks if he likes Agnes. Deddrick, unfazed, dismisses the idea. Marriage is not in his plans. He has someone he's searching for. someone he swore to protect. Shifting the conversation, Deddrick mentions that Agnes will need a tutor. Klaus suggests Viscount Hooks's daughter, as she is familiar with Deddrick's circumstances. Deddrick agrees and writes her a letter. Meanwhile, upon receiving the message, the lady reads it with excitement. Deddrick is asking her to be a tutor for his bride. To her, this can only mean one thing. Her time has finally come. A plan forms in her mind. After all, she believes that she's the only true bride for Deddrick.